actions.
Well, it's like a gun that shoots both ways. You shoot the guy on the other side, and it shoots the other way and shoots you in the head. But it's a delayed soft kill, and by then the bankers and people have scurried off with the money. But it's blowing back on them. I mean, the elites aren't getting out of this. These really are arrogant, crazy people like Corzine making 40-to-1 bets. We find out world leaders aren't taking the vaccines. World leaders are not eating GMO. We find out the generals wanted to stay in different facilities and not areas that have been hit by DU. They know, and they are just absolute scum.
When I called the military last week, because everything's heating up in Syria, Iran, and Pakistan and Afghanistan, and
what'd you tell them, sir?
I told them they can't do this again. They got to stoop. They got to comply with everything. And it was kind of like, oh, Doug, go away. It's like, don't tell us what we already know. Don't tell us what we always agreed on, because when we did the work, we put everything together. We were there, heaven sent. But when we had to act and do something to correct it, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care.
We're on the march.
All right, we are back live. We are lining up Max Keiser right now from France. While we're getting him on the horn, I just want to go back to this Atlantic Monthly magazine article. The hero, Ben Bernanke, saved the global economy, so why does everyone hate him? So now they don't deny the fact that everybody hates him, and everybody hates the private Federal Reserve and knows it's the occupational force. But now we've got to be told that he's our savior, when that's a total lie. The villain. The left hates him, the right hates him even more. But Ben Bernanke saved the economy and has navigated masterfully through the most trying times. The globalist maneuvered us and bragged. The Economist brags, ooh, Goldman Sachs has conquered Europe without a shot being fired. What Napoleon and Hitler couldn't do. Oh, Financial Times of London. I mean, their memos are public. It's all a big joke. MF Global head, John Corzine, former head of Goldman Sachs, ripping people off. They're the ones devaluing the currency. They're the ones that created the derivatives. They're the ones that called all the shots and got rid of Glass-Steagall. All of them. These guys are bigger crooks than Bernie Madoff and Ken Lay. Carbon taxes, all of it. This guy's recommending tax increases and austerity to put the economy into a cardiac arrest so they can buy it all up. And Max Keiser told us a year before the Iceland implosion that he was at the bar there in Reykjavik and the bankers were bragging to him because he's a former big shot stockbroker, TV host. They know who he is. Traded and worked with George Soros' son. A few months ago, he's in Greece. I don't know, 6 months ago now. Walks into the hotel. I went and looked it up later. Steve Jobs was actually blogging for, not Steve Jobs, Forbes. Steve Forbes was actually blogging for Forbes, bragging about how great it was to buy up everything. Well, Max Keiser walks into him, and he's like, Max, it's wonderful. We're imploding their economy and buying everything up. And then selling the public that the global corporations and the global banks are loaning money to Greece, and that Greece was bad. Greece had Goldman Sachs operatives, their president and others, sign them on to debt that wasn't theirs. The derivatives, the too big to fail. Now they're sending the very minions of the same banking structure in to be the presidents and prime ministers in Italy and in Greece. And they tried it in Iceland. The Icelanders said no. And then it turned out, surprise, surprise, 90+% of the debt they were being told was theirs, they had to pay for, wasn't even their debt. The British news was calling the Icelanders terrorists and saying Icelanders won't be allowed to fly to England if their government doesn't pay us the money they owe our banks. Turned out those banks criminally had hijacked Iceland. This is all on record, but the corporate whore media instead tells us that there are heroes. They went in and threatened martial law. This is on record. If Congress didn't give them a blank check in the banker bailout that was really a banker coup d'etat, which is French for coup d'etat. It's an attempt at a joke there from one of my favorite children's movies, Hop. I like Carlos, man. He's a good villain. Anyways, the point is that This is so insane. And now they want a global minimum tax. We're going to play that coming up here in just a little while. Joe Biden's called for this global tax. But I have an article here from the supposed left, from Mother Jones attacking yours truly, the rights Obama martial law fail. And it goes on to say he isn't doing anything scary. There's no NDAA. There's no torture. There's no taking executive orders for nuclear war and saying for any civil or economic emergency they can arrest everybody. I mean, that's what it says, but, you know, they had it on the books before. Yeah, he's just expanding it. There's no TSA sticking their hands down your pants. Alex Jones is a bad man. And Bernanke's a hero. Okay, Max Keiser, you've exposed him as the world's greatest terrorist. What do you think of The Atlantic telling us that Ben Bernanke is a hero, and Goldman Sachs and Rahm Emanuel, that's also in there, are heroes? The whole thing is, I mean, this guy gave birth to the planet. Did you know the sun comes out in the morning, Max Keiser, because of them?
Hey, Alex. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, well, I get into the machinations. You know, I like to look at the actual banking crimes as they are being committed, because when I was working on Wall Street, I was engaged in many of these tactics myself. So it's always fun to see how they're doing it these days, and my sources are very good. You know, last time I was on your show, I described the conversation between Jamie Dimon and John Corzine, where Dimon threatened to kill Corzine, and everything that's come out since then, now the blanks have been filled in. So I've got pretty much the whole picture.
And you were proven correct. It was wired to London. He did know. He did order it. We have the head of the CME group saying he perjured himself. Now the memos are public. Of course, the CEO who ordered the batch stole the money. And that's like you catch a fox with a chicken in its mouth, and it tells you with blood dripping out, I didn't eat the chicken. I mean, it is off the chart ridiculous. What does all this signify? Yeah, give us the rest of the story of why he looted the private accounts, where it's all going, and will he get in trouble, or will he be given some prize by the FBI for being a good citizen?
Yeah, well, I think the way the story is being portrayed right now, they don't really have it correct. I mean, the story really is J.P. Morgan or Jamie Dimon attacking MF Global. And this comes out of the whole recent era of the too big to fail banks getting even bigger. You know, as a result of the 2008 crash, you have Bank of America bought Countrywide and Merrill Lynch. Wells Fargo bought Wachovia. J.P. Morgan bought Bear Stearns. And let me stop you, Max, because I want to be able to hear you. Are you building a barn or something? Because it sounds like you're sawing and stuff. Oh, really? Is that any better now? It just sounds like you're banging on things. Yes, sir. You've got the floor. Just don't. I might be banging. Okay. How's this sound better? There's that. So they got these too big to fail banks are getting even bigger. And as a result, they've become very predatory. So J.P. Morgan sees over at MF Global on their books, they have this huge leveraged Eurobond position. Now, you have to also remember that J.P. Morgan, the MF Global is a client of J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan is their clearing bank, their custodian bank, their creditor. You could almost say that MF Global is a subsidiary of J.P. Morgan. So they know, J.P. Morgan knows everything going on at MF Global. They know their balance sheet. They know their position. So when the timing was right, J.P. Morgan tells MF Global that we need $175 million margin call. We need $175 million. And, of course, they know that they don't have that money. Corzine says, look, we don't have the money. And it was at that time that the famous conversation went down where Jamie Dimon essentially threatens to have him killed. You know, like John Perkins talks about the economic hitman. He'd go into the Pentagon, meet with generals. If he couldn't get people to take the money and the sex, they sent in hitmen. Right. So Corzine says we don't have it. There's a threat to kill him. And then soon thereafter, what we now know from testimony is that Corzine goes into the customer accounts. He transfers $200 million of that customer money into a separate entity. He then calls up J.P. Morgan and says, look, I got the $175 million. I'm going to send that over to you guys. Notice it's not $200 million because that would be too obvious. He uses a slightly different number, this $175 million versus $200 million. And, of course, J.P. Morgan is kind of shocked because they're trying to throw MF Global under the bus because they want access to this huge leveraged Eurobond position. So Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan at that point, they request from MF Global that they send over written confirmation that this money is not coming from customers because they know it is coming from customers. But they want written confirmation that it's not coming from customers because they realize what's going on. Now, that written confirmation never materializes, but that money nevertheless goes over to J.P. Morgan. So now J.P. Morgan has committed crimes 3 different ways. They've purposely thrown the company under the bus. They've instigated customer theft of funds, and they willingly and knowingly took stolen money. Shortly thereafter, of course, the firm goes bankrupt, and this is where we see the payoff, because that huge leveraged Eurobond position gets sold off into the market to George Soros. George Soros fences that position, that multi-$100 million euro position, makes a ton of money, of course, because he's working with J.P. Morgan, and he's a client of J.P. Morgan as well. And they fenced this out to Soros before this all goes down. And we see the progression of yet another bank heist and another incidence of too big to fail getting bigger. And it's all orchestrated from the side of J.P. Morgan. And John Corzine is a bit of a patsy in all this.
All right, well, let me expand on that, though, because I was looking at the connections with Obama and Goldman Sachs and the head of the EPA formerly being Goldman Sachs, and then all these third world countries, the presidents are Goldman Sachs, and then the finance minister is Goldman Sachs. I mean, literally over 8 out of 10 presidents or finance ministers in the world. I just randomly have started looking up the names of African country leaders, Latin American, New Zealand, European. It's Goldman Sachs, Goldman Sachs. I know J.P. Morgan Chase is bigger. I know they're the big Federal Reserve shareholders, all that, heart of the New World Order. I know they're bigger. But then is like Goldman Sachs the technician team that, I mean, what's that relationship there? Because I just see Goldman Sachs operatives everywhere. The money is being funneled back to J.P. Morgan. Is that like Don Corleone up on the hill or something? And then what, A, and then B, what's going to happen to Corzine or whoever? I mean, now, do people perjure themselves and a bunch of money goes missing and no one gets in trouble? Because that signal is going to destroy confidence.
Well, no, the J.P. Morgan is at the top of the pyramid, really, because they're the ones working directly with the Fed. J.P. Morgan has on their books over $90 trillion in derivatives. They have something like 25% of the global derivatives business is right on J.P. Morgan's books. And they also have Blythe Masters, who invented the credit default swap. So when people are frustrated, for example, when the price of silver gets knocked down or the price of gold gets knocked down, that's Blythe Masters. He's in the market terrorizing these markets with these naked credit default swap contracts. That he floods the market with these sell orders, these bogus flash